Thank you so very much for being here. I definitely appreciate it. I know it is day one. I know it has already been a long day, but hopefully an exciting day, right, with SharePoint Conference. So hopefully you are still excited about all of the opportunities and the many things that we have to share with you. I know I definitely am. This is an interesting session for me because this is really exploring how these big platforms that we have inside of Microsoft, to think about Azure and the work we're doing with cognitive services, and how that actually comes together with the things that we know and love the most in Office 365 and SharePoint. So it's my pleasure to be able to talk to you a little bit about how to make your content smarter and how to really put it together and use cognitive services with what we're doing inside of SharePoint. I am joined this afternoon by one of our data platform MVPs who is going to give you an awesome demo of Power BI later on. His name is Treb, and I'll let him introduce himself.
How about there? So my name is Treb Gott from Louisiana, hence my name is not spelled the way it's pronounced. But anyway, data platform MVP, working with SharePoint since the very beginning. And I'm going to follow on with the stuff that Naomi's going to show you, with showing you what you can do with it today, with some of the beginnings of the computer vision information that Office 365 is delivering. So this is stuff you could take away today, tomorrow, and go do something with it. We have a blog post on it. But we're going to delve into it today and talk through it, and then hopefully you can see where this is going to go. So with that,
awesome.
Hand it back to you.
All right, a few things that I wanted to cover with you this afternoon. I want to talk a little bit more about the why, first off. So why would I even think about, computer vision and these cognitive services, and how do these things even matter in my world, right? I have to think about SharePoint and the documents that we work with every single day. And then how does that actually impact some of the scenarios that you might be working on? Then we're going to dive through into many of the technologies. So there's a great range of technology that we have inside of cognitive services. I'm not going to try to go through all of them because we'd literally be here all afternoon and probably most of the evening. And there's no adult beverages, so that would be a really long session. So instead, we will actually go through just a couple of them that I think are really relevant to what we're doing with cognitive services in the SharePoint. And we'll talk through some of the areas that you can do this. I'm also going to then give you a demo of a Power App and actually show how all these things come together. And it's a great example of how you might think about using this inside of your company. But there's a lot more that you can do on top of this as well. So that's kind of our agenda. Hopefully that sounds good. Is that what you're expecting? Yes? Just checking. Anybody saying no? OK, all right, good. That was good fun. All right, so let's talk about a few examples here with computer vision and make sure that sort of understand what we can do. When we talk about computer vision, it is fundamentally the understanding that we have that computers can look at an image and recognize what is inside of that image. And there's a lot of different ways that you can think about using these applications. And so all of the images that we store, right, there's huge amounts of content that's inside of SharePoint and OneDrive, and we have a lot of images in there already. But the reason maybe you may have them in there, maybe just pictures of people, but it actually may also just be pictures of your production line facilities. It might be pictures of birds, plants, all kinds of things that you might work with inside of your companies, and really being able to actually analyze and understand what those images are and how you can use them. So I wanted to give you some examples here of sort of things that you might use as part of these. And so the first one here is around production lines and what we think about finding defects in certain areas. And so as you look at a production line, can you actually take photos of that production line? Can you take photos of the equipment that's being produced and actually look for defects straight off the bat? You can also look at things like plant health. So if you happen to be in the growing business, in agricultural businesses, this is why I've seen this several times, where you can actually either use drones to fly over the tops of crops. You can also go into things like greenhouses and actually use computers there to take that imagery. And so a person is not having to go through and inspect all of these things. You can actually do analysis on there to see if some, a fungus or something has come into those plants. And then even things like, categorization of items on a retail website. So if you think about some of our largest retailers, you've got those images coming in, and they come from a photographer. They've been beautifully done. Somebody manually right now has to go through and say, this is a woman's shirt or a blouse or a skirt or whatever it is. Right? They have to go through and actually categorize those. Now a computer can actually pick that up very easily and save you from some of those tasks of applying metadata effectively inside of your organization. So this is simple things here. But this is also an interesting one to think about how we can actually extend that out to, for example, looking at any kind of user-submitted images into your website. So for example, if you're a business-to-business company, you might have a vendor portal where you have vendors who are submitting images as part of that contract or that supply. Is this a quick way to be able to recognize what's inside of those images and be able to use that and classify it? You can also do things like identifying different elements as part of this. So how do you actually use this to help you identify, count the number of things in a picture? So one of the great examples I saw recently is people who are restocking shelves, right? And so they actually, right now, when you go to the store and people actually are restocking those shelves, oftentimes a manufacturer will send out a representative who actually manually has to count like how many Coke bottles are on the shelf and see how much of that product is left. Now instead, that person can actually just take a picture with a Power App, and the computer can do that counting for them, and they can do some manual adjustment as recognized, but it's a great way to be able to save time and actually take away a lot of that work that's necessary. And then things like hazard detection and industrial safety, obviously looking for those particular areas too. So there's kind of a range of applications if you think about it with computer vision and what you can do. And so we start off at the one side here, it's really looking at pattern recognition and things like anomaly detection. And so those different areas are really simple things. Sometimes it's easier to look for an anomaly. So is there something in that picture that shouldn't be there, right? And you can flag that very easily as well. The other extent of this is really looking at all the way through to defect tracking and preventative maintenance. So can you take regular pictures of things and actually understand that there's a crack in the shaft of a particular element or structure, and actually looking at that and actually analyzing that on grand scale for many of these images. So this is something you can think about from a scaling perspective inside of your organization. You could have a small application, we can have low code, no code kind of situations, all the way up to I have to build a huge custom vision model as part of this. So all good pieces there. So this is a quick example talking about industrial safety. So in this case, we've got an engineer who is in a work site and took off their hard hat, right? This is a violation by doing that, right? It's a simple thing, but it's very hard to be able to track that. And it's a great example of actually seeing that in a security footage camera and actually then being able to analyze it and then take take action based on that. So simple example there. Okay, I'm going to talk through some of these technologies, as I mentioned, and I'm going to give you some quick demos as we go through. Hopefully you've got enough of imagination to think about how you could apply these inside of your organization. I just wanted to give you some simple examples at the beginning. We're going to talk through a lot around computer vision first, because that's probably the area of most interest in this particular perspective for SharePoint. But there's a lot of other cognitive services, and if you haven't been out to look at Azure Cognitive Services, I strongly recommend going to look at them. You can see here in vision, speech, language, knowledge, and search. This is a great way of being able to process all the kind of information you have inside of your organization and actually be able to use these applications within what you're doing with SharePoint. So first off, we're going to talk about computer vision. So this really is that ability to analyze a vision. We can actually do that text extraction. So when you talked about this morning during the keynote, we can right now inside of SharePoint and OneDrive, if you upload something like an image of a business card or a receipt, we will do automatic text extraction as part of that. Now that's actually using behind the scenes Azure Cognitive Services, and it's actually going to be a source of data for Treb's demo later on. And so that text extraction automatically can be something that can be applied to other images that you have as well. Now you can do this as a custom application, as I mentioned, with Cognitive Services, or you can think about how you use what we have built in with SharePoint already. It also does things like generating thumbnails and then, recognition of celebrities. And you might think celebrities, like, why do I need that, right? I don't need, to recognize Kim Kardashian or something in a picture, right? And so, but if you think about it, when they talk about SharePoint and celebrities, in this case, it's actually around all the people who are in Wikipedia. And so there's people like the CEOs of your companies, probably your vice presidents are in there too. And if you think about them from that perspective, it's very useful to be able to recognize those people in photos, be able to search and actually find that information and return it back, and be able to have some either branding awareness, portal awareness, where if they've been photographed, maybe you're just trying to collect all of the pictures of that particular senior individual in your company into one place so that you can reuse it in your corporate assets. So simple applications like that as well. So here's an example of sort of the updates we've made recently with the API here for OCR. And so in this case, you can see this is one of our telephone pole, and you can see that the signage has been degraded over time. But in the old version of OCR, you can see that because the text was on an angle, it wasn't doing so great, and so we had a lot of mistakes. You could still kind of get the gist of what was in there, but you didn't really get to see too much else. But now with that new OCR technology that we have, those upgrades have really helped us get, almost 100% in this particular example here. So even with, degraded text, things that have weathered outside, it's important to be able to still recognize that text and be able to understand signage as part of this. Same example here. So in this case, you've got a very weathered sign. It's on a strange angle. The font is degraded quite significantly. It's not great distinction with the background. And then the old OCR method there, so we got nothing. But in the new one, we actually detected all of that text as part of this. So important area there. Now, the next service I wanted to mention here is Content Moderator. And this is really the ability to understand any kind of, something that's incorrect inside of your images that you don't want to have there. And so an important piece of looking for, could be profanity within text. If you're analyzing that text coming in, it could be images that you're uncomfortable with inside of your organization, and being able to put all of that in there. And the same thing with video moderation as well. So it actually breaks down every video, and it can actually analyze each frame of the video, and then look to see if there's anything that shouldn't be in there. So it's a good technique. So there are many companies that worry about these kinds of problems inside of your organization, and so it's often very relevant to mention that there is a cognitive service to help connect that and to understand that as well. So PII is in there too. And then the other piece from Content Moderator here, being able to actually look through, as I mentioned. So you can actually check through in this text, for example, could be emails, could be other things that you have coming in. You can check through if there's personally identifiable information, and be able to flag that for a whole different set of reasons. So important service there. And then the same thing, obviously, with the video frame detection, and then being able to check through. And then make sure that you can actually do some human review capabilities in there as well. So important areas. Okay, same thing on a video indexer. We're going to talk a little bit about the video insights here. So we actually have a bundle of lots of different services that go into this. So to analyze video is an interesting prospect, right? From a machine learning perspective, you have to understand what people's faces are doing. You've got the transcription of the speech that they're talking. You've got their emotions on their face. They've got whose face is it? What kind of a face is it? You have to analyze between, humans, animals, whatever else that might be in that particular video. And so being able to do all of that understanding is very important as part of this. And so there's an easy way basically to be able to automate these tasks as part of this, and you can actually check out the link there and be able to apply some of this tech simply as well. Okay, Bing Visual Search. So told you there's a lot of cognitive services right in here, and so a lot of different ways to process this information. The cool thing about this one is really being able to understand the applications that you have and being able to call through to other images that might be similar. So you could actually think about, if you're looking for pictures of a red bus, you can give a picture of a red bus as the way to do the search and say, I'm looking for images like this. And so this is a cognitive service that allows you basically to go off and find things that are similar or very, very different depending on the way that you use it. And so it's an easy sort of way to use a tag or to do photo search inside of your organization too. Custom vision, I want to talk a little bit about this. The ones that I mentioned previously are all services that are basically consumable. They're out of the cloud, out of the box, if you will, from Azure. Custom vision actually allows you to train on your own data. And so if you have very specific photographs of, I don't know what it is, if you have some telecommunications equipment or, manufactured equipment, and you want to take pictures of those in different states and actually say, this is the model of how something should look, and then train against that so that you actually have supervised learning occurring, this is the way to do it. And so you can build a custom vision model, and I'll give you a quick example of one of those in a second as well. So let's talk about some of how custom vision actually works. So when you think about these, the uploading that has to happen here, we've sort of expanded this out recently. This is a service that's been around for a couple of years now, but we make more and more improvements to this all the time. And we think about as though you're bringing up those images, so you have to train on a very specific set of images. You can actually use this to actually classify those images as well. So if there's something that's in our inbuilt classifier, you can get that combination effect. And then you can also use this to then say, what exceptions, what other things do I want to be noting as part of this? And so being able to evaluate those images and see what the confidence scores are based on those two. So it's a simple example. So in this case, we've got apples. Apples look very different, right? They're all apples. We know as humans they're all apples, but these, in this case, a red apple, a yellow apple, and a green apple, being able to detect what they are. And then you can see where their occlusions are happening, so where the back apple basically is being covered up by the others, being able to sort of judge with a confidence score of what's actually in that image. And so this is an interesting one of where you might have things that are occluded by other objects and being able to say with some confidence what's actually in there, but you can actually train as part of that and then be able to give it some supervision around this too. So in this case, we can give you some predictions and then you can supervise that learning and be able to apply it inside of your organization too. So the way it works really with image classification in this case, we have to prepare the data, so we have to give it some examples. So we've got some examples across the top here. We can actually give you some building and training as part of this and actually do the definition of the model itself. And oftentimes that means actually doing some human supervision. So just, understanding that with custom models, it does take some work, right? A human has to go through, but it's the same kind of analysis you're probably doing on a lot of this image data anyway. And so being able to actually use that and apply that to a custom model that you can then reuse across your organization definitely has a good effect. And then we can score and run that model. So we can take that, we can train it in the custom vision service, and then of course you can deploy it all over Azure, but you can also use it in many other different services as well. So think about how you use this inside of Power Apps. You could build a mobile application based on this, obviously inside of SharePoint, and then other places too. So one example there. So I got some other thinking here in terms of a customer that we worked with recently where you've got metadata that's actually being extracted from a tourist attraction. So if you think about people walking around, here we are in Las Vegas, right? So if I think about the roller coaster, for example, here in Las Vegas, you could actually do some crowd detection there to understand the faces. You could understand even things like the logos that people are wearing on their shirts, right? To see if they're certain teams or certain fans of certain areas. And you can think about how to use all of that data. So you've actually got the facial detection there that you could use as part of this. You can do logo detection, as I mentioned. Anything else that's there? Maybe are they with children? Are they looking at text in other places too? And then I can also think about how to track that visitor movement in different places. So you actually got the journey here to really understand the cameras here to understand where the presence is and actually taking them through that information and understanding where they're logging each of those points. So it's an interesting one where you can look at a crowd and analyze what's going on in there. And that could be something useful, obviously, from an operational process. If you were looking at how many tickets are being generated in an hour and how many people are actually using those and actually then showing that as part of all of this. So go through those. Same thing here. We can actually, understand that traffic flow because of it, and then it can actually allow you to de-bottleneck that process because we can see where people are congregating, where is the blockage in that process, and actually then move people to where they need to be and help maybe improve signage or understand what the issue is that causes them to sort of throttle in those different areas. So I'll go through those. Okay, I want to sort of talk about one different area here and talk through Q&A Maker. Hopefully you are familiar with Q&A Maker already. You've seen some of the questions and answer bots. Anybody? Yes? A few people? Thank you. All right. So just to very quickly recap. Question and Answer Maker is a very low-code situation. You can actually use this to create a simple bot very easily yourself. You can do it with absolutely no code if you just use the site that we have to help with that. But the reason to do this is to understand a little bit more about these workflow scenarios. So conversational input, having an actual conversation with a robot that is based on the data that you have already inside of organizations. And you can see a whole bunch of different use cases up here to help understand what those are. We can think about, those different bots that you might have. There are simple ones, there are more advanced ones. Maybe retail products and services is probably the most advanced that you can get right now. And you can have that conversational back and forth and have some understanding about recommendations and how those are being generated. Now, when we think about Q&A Maker, it's something you can do right now, which is basically extract a lot of those question and answer pairs. You could take a document that you have right now, which is an FAQ, and turn that into a conversational bot very simply. But the cool thing that they've recently included as part of Q&A Maker is actually the ability to have SharePoint be the source of those data files. And so you can actually have people in your team who are collaborating on those Q&As inside of maybe Word documents or PDF documents and use that as the source of data to make a conversational bot from. It's pretty cool, right? If you think about it. So you've got people who can actually collaborate. The people who are subject matter experts inside of your company can do their real day jobs, and they can put in questions and answers. They can put in the information that they want from a structured knowledge base, and then they can actually use a conversational input to drive that into any kind of website, effectively, or any kind of application that you might have. Even things like a Teams bot as well as part of this too. So it's kind of really taking that sort of hierarchy here that we have from extraction all the way through to understanding this through conversation too. So, yes, so that's a good question. It's a good question. So not right now, but you can actually build a bot that then could talk into Yammer for sure. So it doesn't work with the best reply function in there, but it does. You can build a bot and then surface it through the Yammer API for sure. Yeah. So it's definitely part of the areas there. And then are we looking at sort of how you can extract that data and then create a knowledge base on top of this? This is one of the things I wanted to showcase a little bit here in terms of how do you get conversations that are coming from multiple sources. So it's not just one static document that you could work on. This is actually a collection of documents you could have inside of your organization. They're being authored by different people and different teams. And then you could actually structure the conversation flow through all of those as well. So it's kind of, it can get quite complex as much as you need. And then you can actually use question and Q&A Maker has an automatical hierarchical extraction engine as part of this, and so it can actually understand that conversation and look through the information and finds ways to actually put things together across documents as well. So I'm trying to make this simple. So in this case, you can see there's a tree structure over on the side, on the left-hand side there. It's actually extracting that directly from the document. And then as you put conversation flow on top of it, it will take that hierarchical structure and be able to map it back. So you can do turns, for example, if somebody asks a very random question. If the question doesn't follow on naturally from the last one, it can actually display some intelligence as part of that. And still, you know, it's an early service, I would say. It's been around again for a couple of years. We still keep making improvements there. But it's very exciting to me because you can use the SharePoint sort of knowledge base, if you will, and all of the content you have there, and then use that as part of that conversational experience and taking it forward. Okay, I'll move through these things. All right, last technology that I want to talk you through. Sorry.
So what I'm most excited by.
I know, Forms Recognizer is good. So this is a very cool one that Azure has as part of what they're doing. And Forms Recognizer is the newest one. They just announced it at Build just a couple of weeks ago. So it's just in preview right now. And I'm just going to give you a quick demo because it's easier probably than seeing some of these other areas. And so this is a live service right now. And you can see here, I can select one of these examples down here. You'll see here, it'll actually pop up this form, and so this should look very familiar to if you're in the United States and you have a tax form. So this is a mortgage interest form, and you can see it's actually disambiguated that form and helps you understand what's inside of that form by breaking it down. And so you can see here it's extracted automatically the key value pairs that are there, and then actually can even see the raw JSON file if you want to here as well. And you'll notice as you look at this raw JSON that you actually see that the table boundaries are there too, and being able to understand where that information is here as well.
No question.
Sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Can it read handwritten?
Great question. So can it read handwritten files? So not right now. In this particular instance, there is actually another set of technologies around ink handwriting recognition that Azure does have, but they haven't combined yet the ability for ink and forms, not quite yet. So, to get to that point, so since we're here, I'll do that demo here too. JFK files, so this is the release files that came from the government after 50 years of JFK's assassination. And you can actually have a look at this. It's a live website. And you can check out different results on here. And you'll see in here, this is where that handwriting recognition really comes to the forefront. And so I love looking at this because I can't hardly read some of these images that are on here. And then yet the computer manages to recognize what that is and actually be able to look at that information directly here. And you can explore obviously around here. You can see if I click on one of these documents over here, you can actually see exactly where it's managed to understand that. Even with this big scrolling in the middle and other things, right, that are sort of normal with handwriting, but very difficult if you think about it from a computer vision perspective. So that's a service that's available right now as well. Go ahead. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Yes, so we're going to talk about that just right now. So we can export the data, and I will talk through it in just a second. So But I know it's a lot of tech, but I think it's helpful, right, to understand all these different pieces and components you have access to, so you can put it all together in one place. Okay, let's talk about that and talk about this particular demo here. So I am going to get my phone is on 5. Okay, so let's sort of talk about, let's see.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank
you. So I'm going to talk through an example here. And what I have here is a Power App. This was done in a no-code situation. This Power App is originally developed for a tire manufacturer. And so it's for use by people who are first-line workers. They're using it at a particular shop, for example. And they're able to submit a form to help with a claim of, did the tire blow out? Is it a tire that they support? And being able to understand that. So in this case, I can actually upload a picture here of a work order, as well as a photo of a tire in this case. So I'm going to grab this, take a photo. Here we go. I'm going to just take a photo of my screen for the simple sakes. Sorry. And you can see it doesn't even have to be a really good photo. It actually is pretty complex and pretty good at understanding complex images. I'm going to take another photo of a particular tire here. And this is because we want to check against the warranty for a particular tire. We want to make sure it is actually the tire that people say it is, right? And so you want to make sure that's bona fide, if you will, as part of this. So I can submit that here. And you'll see it's going to go off and submit this into a SharePoint list behind the scenes. So we're using Power Apps. It's going to submit it off to Cognitive Services. It's going to use that computer vision model to analyze the tire and the form to understand that information. And then it's submitted those things. So you can see it says claim has been successfully submitted. And then if I switch back, I will be able to get to my list. Give me 1 second to find the list.
Okay.
Sorry, too many things open. There we go. So here is my list. I'm going to just refresh the data. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
So, thank you. So you can see here, I've got my list, and my list data is going in there. I'm going to say done on this. And you can see the submissions that have come through. And so you can actually put some validation around this list as well. So you can actually tell here, for example, here's the one that we have. We've got an example here where we've just validated that form. It's the correct form and the correct tire. But we can actually see where there are ones that are not validated as part of this too. So, for example, if somebody tried to take a picture of a form that didn't make any sense, it'll actually understand that too. So it's taking that information, it's extracting the information from that form, and then it's also validating it with, is this the right kind of tire we expect to find with that form, and understanding all of that information too. So hopefully it's a sort of a quick example to understand what's going on behind the scenes here. Now, just to sort of recap on that, there's Power Apps. It is custom vision plus that form recognizer piece, all coming together through Microsoft Flow to determine that workflow. And then all of that, of course, is being stored inside of SharePoint in a SharePoint list for status and conditional formatting and flow and all of those areas too. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Treb, who's going to talk you through receipts.
All right. So first question I want to ask to everybody is, how many in here, raise your hands really high, because you guys all look like you're at that brain is full mode here. But raise your hands if you use Power BI today. Good number of you. All right, I got some awesome news for you. So the stuff I'm going to show you is what you can do today and how do I get to this data. Now the stuff that Naomi's been showing you is what's coming, and that's why I'm so excited by this. I've got 2 clients today who are doing proof of concepts. One of them has to deal with invoices. How many of you deal with invoices at all? Don't you just love reconciliation? It's the most fun process in the world. Well, they're a large healthcare company, and they get thousands of these things every month. And right now, they're having to physically look at the receipts and go look at the budget, do all this stuff, this manual effort. It's very time-consuming. When we showed them what they could do with the OCR that's in the product today, they got very excited. In fact, they put together a POC at the fastest time I've ever seen, because the possibility of being able to eliminate a huge manual effort was there. And so this is the kind of thing we were talking about where we can scan, you know, if you look at, well, if I actually switch over to my machine here, I have a live version of one of the things that they're looking for. How many of you love expense tracking? Raise your hands. You weirdos. I mean, I personally hate it. But imagine you could upload this. And I know Naomi showed this at Ignite last year where she uploaded a receipt to the SharePoint site, and all of a sudden you could search on it. And we're all like, oh, that's awesome. Except I went, you know what? I want to report on that. So we want to take this a little bit further. And so what we did is we've had to figure out how to get to this data, how to extract it, and then how to get it into Power BI. And so I'm going to walk you through that process. But this is huge. The other thing, too, that we're seeing with computer vision is we have a lot of companies that are dependent on people seeing something. So if you didn't see it, it doesn't exist, right? Well, one company in particular, they have a fleet of drones that inspect these big windmills. You know, if you go out like in eastern Washington, where I live up in Seattle, in eastern Washington, there's all these massive windmills generating power. Well, these things get hit by lightning, and there's not exactly a guy climbing up on these things all the time. Whereas they can fly a drone out there and look at it, and using computer vision, they'd be able to spot, oh, we've got a lightning strike, we've got it, and then trigger through flow, hey, we need to service, we need a service call for this. But that's the kind of world we're moving toward, is that they're enabling us to unlock unstructured data that we've been collecting since the dawn of time, it feels like, in SharePoint, and actually make it actionable. For the first time ever, I don't necessarily need the human involved to go do something. And so this is where we're going to be able to use this to develop better answers. And what I tell people is we need answers, not more reports, because God forbid we get any more of those. So hopefully you'll be able to use this to do some very good stuff within your own organization. So the first thing I want to do here is, if you notice with receipts, one of the things that we saw was that receipt number was usually at the bottom. And so what we're going to do is figure out a way to get to that. And I've got a very small set, and again, you can try this on your own. So I'm going to flip over here, and this is actually just sitting in a document library. So nothing special, just upload it. In fact, when you upload it to SharePoint today in Office 365, you can wait anywhere from 1 minute to about 10 minutes for this to start showing up, for this other additional information to show up. And it also works in OneDrive. So there were some slight variances in whether or not it was the out-of-box document library or one you created or one OneDrive. So what I did is we found a place where it's the same in all three. So that's what I'm going to show you. Now, if you go to Power BI, and for those of you who've used Power BI, you know, if you go to New Source and you go here to More, and you wait a few minutes, and eventually it comes up, and you type in SharePoint, you've got a folder and a list connector. Now, because we've uploaded a file to SharePoint, our natural tendency is to think, oh, I'm going to use the folder connector. Guess what? That's not the right one. Because if you use the folder connector, what you're getting is the content of the file, not the information around the file itself. So in this case, what you want to do is use the online list, because a document in and of itself is, in some structure, a list anyway, and that's where all the properties are. So what we wound up with, and I'll take you through this. So I connected and I found my folder here, and then you get all of these lovely fields back from SharePoint. And your first tendency, of course, is to look at these media service columns, because these are what's automatically populated by the OCR, the computer vision process. It used to be called OCR. You can tell how old I am if you go way back. But these are automatically populated. The thing is, these columns aren't present in all three. So I'm going to show you how to get to the ones that are. But if you look at this, the first thing you see is you see auto tags. And this is where it actually uses computer vision to determine what is in the image. Now, if I'm in records retention or records manager, this might be an interesting way to determine what type of content I have in my farm. We were at AIM in San Diego in March, listening to people really in pain over trying to determine what was going on in their farm. How do we eliminate stuff that's not supposed to be there? Now you've got a service that could give you some clues as to what this photo is, what this image file is. Also, if you look at the OCR column here, you can see it pulled out the text. So here I've got a screenshot, and there was text in the screenshot, so it actually extracted all that text for me. And if I click on this, you can see the full amount of what was pulled out. Now notice everything is done on a separate line, so you're going to have to do some parsing to get there, but you've got it. I mean, think about all of those things that we've always scanned for archival purposes that we've got for years and years. You know, I worked for government for a short time, and you know, we had high-speed scanners just to scan HR documents. Well, now we can actually mine those photos, those images for the text and do something with them. The other thing you've got over here is location. So if you are using a phone, like your iPhone or an Android phone, and you've got location turned on when you take the photo, the EXIF data, the extended information, well, I guess it's extended information, is already embedded into the file. And one of the things that that contains is actually the exact location of where you took the photo. So if you start to think about this, what happens if I'm in a services type organization where we've got field services people doing stuff, and say they're doing air conditioner repair. In fact, I have to have my AC repaired right now. The guy's going to come out, he's going to take a look at it, and then they're going to have to figure out what they have to order. Well, the thing is, if they had all this technology, the guy could just pull out his cell phone, take a photo of it, it would identify what the part is, it would give them a part breakdown, and then they could choose from there. I mean, it could speed up this process tremendously. So there's a lot of potential here. Now, what we're looking for, though, when you get into this, is there's something called properties. And if you've ever, how many of you have actually attached Power BI to SharePoint before? Raise your hands. All right. So you know the joys of getting to the yellow text, because what these are subqueries. And if you go over here, there's a properties yellow field here. This is where we've got to get to. And if we hit the expand button and we let it load, this has got to query the whole thing here. There are also those media, if I can type today, it'd be dangerous. There we go. So we have all of the same media columns here as well that you can get to. And these are consistent across OneDrive, across any document library you create, and across the out-of-the-box shared documents folder. So these are the ones you want to use. But given this, you can go through a process. So, you know, it would help if I click on the right thing. There we go. So we expanded it. We got some of the information out of here. So if you look at this, it's just returning JSON. You can see the kind of information it's returning from a process perspective. If I have a photo, let's see if I could find one real quick. You start to see some of the information that gets returned. So it's actually in this metadata that sometimes you can see the location of when stuff was taken. So, you know, and the cool thing is, because Power BI understands JSON, it can parse this out. You can analyze it to no, you know, with no issues. But we went through here, we filtered it for tags. So what we did here is we did a contains that says, just show me the receipts. I don't need to see anything else. And again, because it knows from those media tags, it's a receipt. That's actually one of the tags it returns. You can filter the list. I'm hoping to get invoice with the, you know, the other stuff here. It's going to be awesome. And then we did some detection of the data type. One of the interesting behaviors of Power BI with SharePoint is, if you notice, none of the columns have a type. It says ABC123. And in Power BI, if you don't have a data type, that eliminates a lot of the goodness that you can have in it. So you want to go through and basically highlight your columns here like this, you know, control click like you do in Excel, go to transform, and then do detect data type, and it fixes it for you. So that's what we did here. Then we expanded file to get the file name, so we got that here. And then we had to find the position of the last number. And this here is a more advanced technique, but basically you can pass to this function a range of characters, so 0 through 9, and tell me the last place it finds it in the string. This is a cool function in Power BI. If you ever had to do this in Excel, you know what pain is. This is easy. It's one statement, boom, it gives you the number. And then from there, we could get the total length of the OCR field. So we got that. And then we extracted the field down to the last number. So if we look down at what we've got here, so this is our extract. So we're getting down. I've got my taco time. I do love my tacos, by the way. It shows, doesn't it? About 4 months long, I think, at this point. But anyway, but this is the text off of that receipt that you were seeing. And so what I'm trying to do now is get to the place where I can get just that 23.94 out of this. And if you remember how I mentioned everything is line feed delimited, that's not typical. So how do you fix that? Well, we replaced it with a bar. So now what I've got is this. well, that looks a little bit better. I can do something with that. And then we said, let's find the position of the last bar. So we get a number here. So in this case, 103. And then we're going to extract from the 103 to the end, just like you would in Excel. That left me with the 23.94. And then we'll clean it up, basically removing spaces, replace the commas if we've got that, changing the type. And essentially what we wind up with is this. So we get our final number. So if I just go down to the bottom here, you'll see that I've got a bunch of stuff in here. There we go. But there's my 2394. So once I pulled that out, what that gave me was the ability to create a dashboard around this. So now I've got, in this document library, my total receipts equal $83.01. But I can also break it down and I can see, oh, how many photos do we have with a person in it? How many do we have with a receipt? So in this case, I've got 3. How many have text in them? So this kind of thing, and then you can also filter it by file type. There's all sorts of possibilities here. This is just a simple example. But imagine the fact that we can now unlock stuff we've never been able to get to before. And once we get the form extractor and some of the other computer vision stuff, the sky's the limit. So for those of you who did not raise your hand about Power BI, we need to talk. There's so much more goodness that you can get out of SharePoint by augmenting it with this tool. So any questions about what we walked through here? I'll provide a copy of the model if anybody's interested, and I'll work with the conference to see where we can post this. But we also have a blog post that goes through it in detail because we actually wound up doing a video around this as well to help people. Yes? Could I use the email as my input? Oh, could we email it to you?
Into SharePoint.
So I haven't actually tried it against email, but it should work because I have a model that I use for my timesheets today. So essentially, I use my calendar to mark when I work and who I work for, and then I attach to Exchange from Power BI and then mine my calendar. So theoretically, we should be able to get to the attachments in email and do essentially the same thing. Yeah. Well, and I can definitely see where you would want to take some of the information that's in here and augment notes with it. You know, so it is, and I would think you'd be able to put flow on top of this that says, oh, if I see a certain type of indicator in there, then kick off a flow on top of this. So the thing is, like this particular card here, in Power BI, if you have a card or a KPI visual, you can actually kick off a flow from this. You can set a threshold. So I can say, oh, if I have more than $40 outstanding in receipts out here, kick off a flow, start notifying people, write records in other systems, whatever you need it to do. Nobody has to go out and actually look at this. That'll happen automatically when it's refreshed. And then things get really crazy if you want to go, if you go to any of the flow sessions, you can see some of how far you can take that as well. The other cool thing is that this is all mobile enabled. So if you wanted to see this on your watch, for example, I actually have a dashboard running on my Apple Watch. Anything that's a card or a KPI can be visualized there. It's changing the way that we work. It's all about the answers that we can get from this, not the reports. So we're unlocking more data than ever before. We need to rethink, I think, some of the manual processes that we are seeing out there. We had one organization in particular, using some of this information, was able to eliminate almost 100 hours a week of manual effort. So there's probably some small projects that you can take care of with this functionality as it stands today. And then where it takes it from there, we're going to be able to do some really awesome stuff. Any other questions? I'm going to have to look into the email thing. I'm very curious about that. I'll get back to you.
Sure. Just a couple slides to wrap up, so I appreciate Trev doing that demo. It's interesting to see all of these things working together, right, and understanding how you can run some analysis and really get some smart content and have some understanding of what's going on in there. I just wanted to give a couple of recap here. We talked about Flow and Power Apps. Those are kind of no-code, low-code solutions, right, of how you can incorporate cognitive services. You can call cognitive services off through Flow directly, so you can do some computer vision there. You can do language understanding, all of those pieces together. We talked about Power BI, which is sort of in that middle ground, if you will, between code and low-code. We've also got some great enhancements for Microsoft Search in extensibility. There are 2 sessions tomorrow that talk about Microsoft Search and really how we're taking the customizations around the header and other pieces that you could use as well, and then the SharePoint patterns and practices. And then, of course, using SharePoint really is the basis there of your storage and everything else that's going on inside of your company from a Microsoft Graph API perspective, and being able to build the Data Connect with Azure on top of that. And so you can actually grab that data, process it, and do amazing things with it, and use the SharePoint framework on top of that. I have put in some resources in here. These are the 2 sessions up top here. We talked about Microsoft Search. It's a bit odd having this session before some of those sessions, but it is what it is. So you can go back and hopefully watch the recordings for that one as well. So the other one that's coming up is Treb's session on unlocking your Microsoft Search and SharePoint data with Power BI. So he'll go into a lot more detail there on Thursday afternoon. So there's those. I've put in links to all of the different cognitive services that we talked about, the Forms Recognizer that's out in preview right now. You can test out with some of your own content there, computer vision as well. And then there's a couple of links I would recommend at the bottom here, which is really around if you're trying to learn more about AI in general. We have an AI school that's available through Microsoft, so you can go through some self-guided training on there, and it's very helpful just to get some grounding as part of that. And then for your business colleagues, we have an AI for Business school, which actually helps you a little bit more in terms of understanding the applications and the customer case studies of how those AI services have come together. So with that, we will close out, because I know it's the end.